warning. This episode discusses race, media framing, and accusations of racism tied to political content. Some listeners may find the topic uncomfortable. Our goal is not to inflame or excuse, but to examine intent, context, and accountability honestly. We reject bad imagery and bad faith, and we believe truth requires holding both at the same time.
We live in a political moment where intent no longer matters. Context is treated like a nuisance, and the loudest accusation wins by default. Over the weekend, that pattern played out again when a poorly clipped social media video, posted by a junior staffer, was instantly transformed into a national accusation of racism against Donald Trump. No questions asked, no verification, just outrage on demand. The clip in question was a clip about election fraud, but due to a simple editing mistake, the post ran a couple seconds too long and bled into the start of a separate video, briefly showing imagery that never should have been included. That moment was wrong, distasteful, and deserved to be corrected. What it did not deserve was to be weaponized as proof of motive, character, or ideology. And yet, within minutes, the accusation was locked in. Not what happened, not who posted this, not was this intentional, but this proves who he is. That's not journalism. That's not accountability. That's narrative enforcement. And it's exactly how real conversations about race, responsibility, and power get poisoned beyond repair. Tonight, we're not here to excuse bad imagery. We're also not here to accept bad faith. We're here to slow this down, apply basic logic, and ask the questions that should have been asked before the internet decided it already knew the answer. Tonight, we're bringing in the full data and dissonance table, because this is one of those stories where you need more than one lens. Brian's here, bringing the MAGA fire and calling out the double standards that only seem to apply in one direction. Rachel's in the chair as always, cutting through spin, asking whether outrage actually matches reality, and grounding this in fairness instead of frenzy. Daniel's with us, connecting the dots between media incentives, outrage economics, and why these mistakes always seem to explode the same way. And Skylar's here too, pushing back where it's warranted, calling out why imagery matters, and forcing the conversation to stay honest instead of tribal. This isn't about yelling past each other. It's about walking through the facts, the optics, and the intent, all at the same time, without pretending one erases the other. Let's get into it. Before we let this turn into another viral drive-by accusation, we need to establish what actually happened, not what people decided it meant. A video put out by a staffer about election and voter fraud was the main video. Near the end of that clip, a brief segment appeared that never should have been included. That imagery was wrong, it deserved to be taken down, and it was corrected. What it does not prove is intent, and that distinction is exactly what's being ignored. Whether this was a bad edit, bad oversight, or bad judgment at the staff level, the key issue remains the same. You don't assign motive without evidence. That mistake matters, but so does intent, and that's the line everyone seems determined to erase. There is a real difference between bad optics and bad motives, between a staffer error and a presidential message, and between correcting something quickly and turning it into a permanent moral indictment. Those distinctions used to matter. Now apparently they're optional. So tonight, we're going to do what the media didn't bother to do. Slow it down, separate the mistake from the meaning, and ask whether outrage has replaced reason yet again, or whether this is one of those moments where the truth is far less dramatic than the headlines wanted it to be. Brian, let me start with you. When you look at this situation, do you see accountability being demanded or a narrative being enforced?
What I see is an accountability. It's opportunism, plain and simple. This wasn't some carefully crafted message from the president. It wasn't a dog whistle. It wasn't even a finished product. It was a rushed social media post that a staffer screwed up. And instead of asking who posted it or why it clipped wrong, the left went straight to the most inflammatory accusation possible. That tells you everything you need to know. If this were really about fighting racism, they'd care about facts and intent. But they don't. They care about damage, headlines, and keeping the accusation alive long enough to stick. Because once racist is said, it doesn't matter what comes out later. And here's the part that really gets me. They're pretending context doesn't exist on purpose. Anyone who's ever edited video knows exactly what happened here. A bad splice, a bleed over, a couple of seconds too long before export. You can literally see the transition. But acknowledging that would collapse the narrative. So instead, they act like this was some deliberate artistic choice approved at the top. That's absurd, and they know it. This is the same crowd that will excuse literal riots, violent rhetoric, and openly racist language when it comes from their side, but suddenly becomes hyper-moral when there's a chance to smear Trump. It's not consistency, it's a weapon. And let me be clear, because this matters. Nobody is defending the imagery. Monkey references tied to black people are wrong, period. But weaponizing a mistake like this cheapens real racism and turns it into a political prop. If every intern error is treated as presidential intent, then no administration survives modern media, especially not conservative ones. This isn't about decency, it's about power, and the power to label, shame, and silence without ever proving intent. That's what people should actually be worried about here.
Yeah, and that's the part that keeps jumping out at me too, Brian, the speed. Not just how fast the accusation landed, but how confidently it landed without curiosity. No pause, no let's confirm, no acknowledgement that this was a social media post handled by staff, not a presidential address or campaign ad. It was straight to motive, straight to character, straight to the worst possible conclusion. And that tells you this wasn't about correcting a mistake, it was about locking in a label before anyone could slow the tape down. And I agree with you on something important that a lot of people are afraid to say out loud. Calling everything racism doesn't make us more moral, it makes us more reckless. Because when intent no longer matters, when context no longer matters, then the accusation itself becomes a blunt instrument. And once you normalize that, it doesn't stop at Trump or conservatives or even politics. It turns into a culture where mistakes are treated as confessions and outrage replaces judgment. That's not accountability, that's fear-based control. So, Rachel, let me bring you in here, right? Because you tend to live in that uncomfortable middle ground. You've said before that optics still matter, even when intent isn't there. Looking at the situation, how do you balance the fact that the imagery was wrong and deserved correction, without buying into the idea that a sloppy staffer error somehow proves racist intent at the top? Where's the line between acknowledging harm and rejecting a bad faith smear?
I think the only way to have this conversation honestly is to refuse the false choice that people are trying to force. It's not, either you call this racism or you're excusing it. That's lazy, and it's manipulative. The imagery was wrong, full stop. Even accidental monkey imagery connected to black people carries historical weight, and pretending it doesn't is irresponsible. So yes, it deserved to be taken down, addressed, and owned as a mistake. That part isn't controversial to me, and it shouldn't be controversial to anyone acting in good faith. But where I completely break from the outrage narrative is intent. There is a massive difference between saying this shouldn't have happened and saying this proves who Trump is. That leap is where the dishonesty lives. When you actually look at how the clip was made, the abrupt transition, the tonal shift, the fact that it clearly bleeds into a different video, it screams human error, not ideological messaging. If we're going to claim racism, it has to be grounded in evidence of intent or pattern, not a couple seconds of accidental footage posted by a staffer who clearly didn't catch it in time. What worries me most is the long-term damage this does to real conversations about race. When every mistake is treated as proof of moral depravity, people stop listening. It hardens sides, cheapens the word racism, and makes it harder to call out actual deliberate discrimination when it happens. Accountability should mean correcting harm and learning from it, not turning every misstep into a permanent scarlet letter. If we care about racial sensitivity, we have to care about accuracy and fairness too, or else the whole thing becomes performative.
Yeah, Rachel, that's exactly the line that keeps getting crossed, and it's crossed intentionally. Acknowledging that something shouldn't have happened is not the same thing as assigning motive. But the outrage machine doesn't want correction, it wants culpability, and if it can't find it, it just declares it. That's why nobody waited for clarification, why nobody asked who posted it, why nobody cared that it was clearly a bad clip splice, because slowing down would have ruined the payoff. And here's the part that sticks with me. This wasn't framed as this was a mistake and here's why it's harmful. It was framed immediately as this tells us who Trump really is. That leap skips process, skips evidence, and skips reality. And once you normalize that, you're not talking about accountability anymore. You're talking about conditioning people to accept accusations without proof, as long as they point in the right political direction. And Daniel, let me bring you in here, because you've talked a lot about outrage cycles and media incentives. When you look at how fast this story moved from a sloppy intern mistake to a full-blown racism narrative, what does that tell you about how these stories are designed to spread? Is this even about Trump at all? Or is it about keeping the outrage economy fed no matter what the facts say?
This has almost nothing to do with Trump anymore, if it ever did. What you're watching is a pre-built outrage pipeline doing exactly what it was designed to do. There's a reason this story didn't slow down, didn't clarify, didn't correct itself. The system can't afford to slow down. Outrage is a perishable commodity, and the moment context enters the conversation, the emotional return drops. So the machine does what it always does: identify a flashpoint, assign intent immediately, and amplify before verification can interfere. And here's where it gets uncomfortable for people who still believe this is organic. These narratives don't spread because they're true. They spread because they're useful. A 2-second clip error becomes a moral indictment because it reinforces an existing storyline. It confirms what certain audiences already know, so it doesn't require proof. That's why nobody asked whether Trump saw it, approved it, or even knew it existed. Those questions are dangerous to the narrative. They introduce friction, and friction is the enemy of virality. What really gives this away is the timing and uniformity. The accusation hit all at once, with the same framing, the same language, the same conclusion. That's not coincidence. That's coordination, or at least convergence driven by shared incentives. Media outlets need clicks, activists need outrage, algorithms need engagement. Trump just happens to be the most reliable lightning rod to feed the system. So the story becomes less about what happened and more about maintaining the emotional rhythm. Outrage, reinforce, repeat. And the long-term danger here isn't Trump getting smeared. He's been through this before. The danger is that people are being trained to stop asking basic questions. Who made it? Who posted it? Was it intentional? Those questions used to be the bare minimum. Now they're treated like heresy. When accusation replaces investigation, truth becomes optional. And once truth is optional, power decides what reality looks like. That's the part people should actually be afraid of.
That last point is the one that really matters to me, Daniel, because once accusation replaces investigation, everyone becomes fair game. And that's not a right-wing problem or a left-wing problem. That's a societal problem. When the process doesn't matter anymore, when intent is assumed instead of proven, the standard collapses. Today it's Trump. Tomorrow it's someone else. Eventually it's anyone who steps out of line or gets caught in a bad edit, a bad clip, or a bad moment that somebody else controls. But here's where I want to be careful, because we don't want to swing so far into defending against bad faith that we ignore the real concern people are expressing. Optics still matter. Imagery still matters. Harm can still exist even without intent. And if we don't acknowledge that, we lose credibility with anyone who isn't already on our side. That's why this conversation can't just be about calling out the outrage economy. It also has to be about where responsibility actually lives when something like this happens. Skylar, let me bring you in here. You've been clear that imagery carries historical weight, especially in racial contexts. Looking at this situation, how do you separate the real discomfort people felt seeing that clip from the bad faith rush to blame Trump personally? And in your view, what does a fair response look like? One that takes the harm seriously without turning an intern's mistake into a character indictment of a president?
So I'll be upfront about where I'm coming from, because hiding it doesn't help anyone. I've never been a Trump supporter, and I don't suddenly become one just because the media overreaches. And that's actually why I think this moment matters. The imagery was genuinely uncomfortable to see. Monkey imagery tied to Black people has a long, ugly history, and people aren't wrong to react emotionally to that. Dismissing that reaction outright would be a mistake. You don't need malicious intent for harm to exist, and I think it's fair to say that whoever handled that clip failed at a very basic level of judgment and review. But where I part ways with the left's response is the automatic assignment of motive. There's a difference between saying, this shouldn't have happened, and saying, this proves Trump is racist. That leap feels intellectually dishonest, especially when the evidence clearly points to a technical error, a bad clip splice that bled into another video. If we're serious about accountability, then accountability has to be aimed at the actual decision makers involved in posting and editing the content, not reflexively elevated to the top because it's politically convenient. What also bothers me is how quickly nuance gets erased. I don't think it helps anyone, especially people who care about racial justice, to turn every mistake into a moral absolutism. When accusations are made this loosely, they lose power. People stop listening, and that ultimately hurts the very causes the left claims to be defending. You can call something inappropriate, demand better standards, and still acknowledge that intent matters. Those positions are not in conflict. If there's a fair response here, it's this: acknowledge the harm, explain the mistake clearly, correct it immediately, and move on without turning it into a referendum on someone's soul. I don't need to defend Trump to say that blaming him personally for a staffer's editing error isn't serious thinking. It's reaction politics. And reaction politics might feel good in the moment, but it doesn't actually move us toward accountability or understanding.
This is why stories like this matter more than they seem on the surface, not because of a bad clip, not because of a sloppy edit, but because of how fast people are willing to abandon process when outrage is available. Every single person at this table, from completely different political viewpoints, agreed on the same core facts. The imagery was wrong, the mistake should have been corrected, and blaming Donald Trump personally for a staffer's error is intellectually dishonest. And that's the part that keeps getting ignored. You don't need to like Trump. You don't need to defend his policies. You don't even need to support him politically to recognize when a narrative is being forced. When accusation replaces investigation, we're not talking about accountability anymore. We're talking about conditioning people to accept conclusions without evidence. That should worry everyone, regardless of where you land on the political spectrum. So we're going to leave this story here, not with outrage, not with excuses, but with something that's become rare: clarity. You can reject bad imagery and reject bad faith at the same time. And if we lose the ability to do that, the problem isn't one politician or one party. It's the culture we're building.
Real quick, if you're exhausted by narratives being decided before facts, that's exactly why data and dissonance exists. And yeah, we turn that mindset into merch: shirts, hoodies, mugs, and gear for people who still believe intent matters, context matters, and you don't convict people over 2 seconds of bad editing. This isn't hype merch, it's signal. Grab something from the store, support the show, and help us keep pushing back on manufactured outrage without screaming like everyone else. Store links in the description.
We've reached a point in our culture where the accusation matters more than the truth, and the speed of outrage matters more than the accuracy of it. What happened here wasn't complicated. A video was poorly edited by a staffer. It ran too long. It showed imagery that never should have been posted. That deserved correction, explanation, and accountability at the level where the mistake actually happened. What it did not deserve was a full-blown character indictment of Donald Trump, as if he personally storyboarded, edited, and approved a 2-second clip bleed on social media. That leap wasn't accidental. It was convenient. What bothers me most isn't even the accusation itself. It's how many people are willing to suspend basic reasoning the moment outrage feels justified. No one asked who posted the clip. No one asked how it was made. No one waited for clarification. The conclusion came first, and the facts were expected to catch up later, if they were allowed in at all. That's not accountability. That's narrative enforcement. And once that becomes normal, the standard doesn't just apply to politicians. It applies to anyone unlucky enough to be caught in a bad edit, a bad screenshot, or a bad moment that someone else controls. And here's the truth that shouldn't be controversial, but somehow is. You can say the imagery was wrong and say the accusation was dishonest. You can acknowledge harm and demand fairness. Those positions don't cancel each other out, and they're supposed to coexist. If we lose the ability to separate intent from error, then we're not fighting racism, misinformation, or injustice anymore. We're just trading truth for tribal satisfaction. And that's a price this country can't afford to keep paying. Remember to speak truth, stir thought.
Tonight's episode is brought to you by the Caleb Rourke thriller series, The Covenant Protocol, The Prophet Directive, and Black Echo Rising. If you like stories that cut through noise, challenge narratives, and ask uncomfortable questions about power, loyalty, and truth, those books were written for you. Available now on Amazon. Links are in the description. And on the music side, don't miss Uncaged. Raw, loud, and unapologetic. It's the sound of pushing back when you're told to sit down and shut up. Dropping this week, a brand new country album, Four Wheelers and Hallelujah, grit, faith, backroads, and freedom, wrapped into one record. Plus the new single Stand Tall Charlie, dedicated to Charlie Kirk, a song about conviction, backbone, and standing firm when the pressure hits. Books, music, no filters, all the links are waiting for you in the description.